Happy New Year, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome back. Hopefully you had a good holiday and a good break if you got a break. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web. I'm your host, Jeremiah Fox. Before we kick it off this year, this decade, getting it fired up and ready, I'm going to read, we could call this the message of the week, the message of the year, the message of the decade. It's just a message. If my phone would unlock, I could read that for you. Give me just a second. Dun, dun, dun. This message is by a gentleman named Chris Winters. He's a serial nomad entrepreneur. This is a term I just became familiar with this week. Never heard that before. I just became familiar with Chris Winters this week. If you haven't, if you're not familiar with him, check him out. Very transformative person. Been quite successful recently, but he was a guy that got kind of started later in life. He's got a very interesting story. You can find him on a number of podcasts. So I was listening to a podcast this week and he popped up and he said a really great thing that I thought really had a lot to do with my guest today and the topic of discussion today. And his quote was, "Some people will gain a lot of success quickly and they'll lose it. They will go back down. That's normally because they're so close to their old environment and their old selves. Completely immerse yourself in a brand new environment if you want to gain some kind of success, some kind of transformation." With that, I would like to introduce my guest today, a friend, a neighbor, an old buddy, Joanne Derwin. I'll read a little bit about Joanne and her past, and then we'll chew the fat and let her digress a little bit on that. Joanne is a mother of two bilingual children and an experienced nonprofit manager, educator, and social justice advocate. Before initiating One World Project, Joanne worked at the Alliance for a Greater New York and Urban Agenda, organizations aimed at building a thriving green and just New York. Previously, Joanne worked at the Ford Foundation and helped manage 3 grant-making initiatives with a combined annual budget of $12 million. Joanne has also done research for Partners of the Americas and the Center for Public and Nonprofit Leadership in Washington, D.C., and spent 2 years working as an English teacher in Alicante y Barcelona. Barcelona, did I say that right?
Exactly.
In España. The rest of it got cut off. No, she's an environmental study. She is a graduate in environmental studies from the University of Colorado in Boulder and holds a master's in public policy from Georgetown University. You've been around a little bit.
That's right.
You kind of bounced around. Where are you from originally?
So I'm from Millersville, Maryland, which is a small town sort of between Annapolis and Baltimore, sort of suburban, rural.
Yeah,
that's where I grew up.
Like greater DC area, but in Baltimore area, but like a little drive.
Yeah, no, I mean, so very more of a drive.
Yeah.
We actually never went to DC or Baltimore. We just stayed in Millersville generally. So it was long enough that you sort of had everything right there. But there was a farm down the street.
Yeah.
We, muck stalls, took care of horses. Spent a lot of time in the woods running around.
Nice. That's great.
Yeah, it was pretty.
And you in your bio
childhood.
talked about some green initiatives. So that's something, I know you talk a lot about the environment, and it's a big part of One World Project. Would you contribute your childhood memories to some of that?
I mean, some of it. I mean, certainly the connection to the farm is really a big part of who I am. But both my mom and dad aren't very outdoorsy. Like every family vacation, we would come to Brooklyn. They're both from.
I was going to ask, what's the connection to New York City?
Yeah. So my mom, who passed away 5 years ago, almost today, was from Marine Park.
Oh, cool.
And my dad sort of grew up all through New York.
Nice.
And so they met on Atlantic Avenue many, many years ago. And I've sort of always been enamored by Brooklyn. And I had an opportunity to move to New York with the Ford Foundation after I went to graduate school. And so it felt like, in a way, coming home, right?
And you spent time here as a kid.
I did. Yeah. My mom's mom was here. So we spent a lot of time with my grandmother.
So were you hanging out in Marine Park?
Yeah.
Special.
Yeah. Marine Park.
You can't buy those experiences at Marine Park back in the day.
Yeah.
You ever hang out with Bobby Seeger back then?
Not Bobby Seeger, but Uncle Joe. You don't,
I don't know Uncle Joe. You know Bobby Seeger though, right?
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't? Do you know Madeline Gomez? She's watching. that somebody you know?
I don't know Madeline
No.
Gomez.
Hi, Madeline. How are you? Good to see you. Welcome. So did you stayed in Maryland through high school?
Yeah. So I was born in Maryland, stayed in Maryland, and then in college.
What drove two New Yorkers to like somewhat rural Maryland to where you said they had no connection to nature really? What brought your parents there? Was it work or
work? Yeah.
Yeah.
So my dad worked for the National Security Agency.
Yeah, makes sense.
All growing up.
I was going to ask if it was a military connection.
Yeah. So Fort Meade,
Mhm.
which is pretty close by, and Millersville.
The whole area is dotted. I lived in Norfolk, Virginia for a while,
Okay.
and I used to drive up this way all the time, and you're just driving through like military bases like the entire way. There's like that major, was it there's an Air Force base in Delaware or something, like right on. It's just crazy. It's just like military everywhere. But like southeastern Virginia is like, that's all it is like military with shopping centers.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So NSA.
Cool. So he did that. And I went to school my freshman year at the University of Delaware. And
okay. Is that in Wilmington?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, Newark.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And
did you ever go to Wilmington? I've like driven through it, but it's like, it always interested me. I've just never actually like been inside. And like, do you know anything about it?
I know very little.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I just spent a year in
You
Delaware.
didn't go to DC, you didn't go to Baltimore, you didn't go to Wilmington.
No, I mean,
I'm straight going to Brooklyn.
No, growing up, we never really spent any time in Baltimore or DC, but my husband and I got married in Baltimore.
Okay.
Yeah. So do have a special connection with Baltimore as well.
Gotcha.
And then and then I went to school in DC and lived
Georgetown,
there.
Right?
Yeah.
How was that?
It was great. Yeah. It was, I learned a lot, had my
international
ideology.
City too. It's like
challenged. Went to school with people I really respect.
And what was your degree in there?
Public policy.
And that was your master's degree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So prior to that, you went to school, in Boulder, in Colorado.
Yeah. So University of Delaware, spent a year there, had a great experience, but never dreamed of going to school at University of Delaware. In fact, sent my parents a postcard, an aerial view of Newark, and with a little note that said, like, this is where you've left me. So as soon as I got there, I sort of thought about like where I wanted to go and where I wanted to transfer to. And I had always dreamed of my senior year of high school. I did an Outward Bound experience and sort of that almost cliche of the transformative experience of Outward Bound. That was very much my experience.
That's great. I mean, that's why it's there, right?
I mean, it was
awesome.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. Dr. Wittick, I think that was our principal at Severna Park High School, somehow managed to get a grant to send a big herd of us, on student government, to go to.
So there's a little trail of crumbs left for you. Nice.
Yeah. So anyway, that was extraordinary. University of Delaware, then figuring out how can I do more work with environment. University of Colorado made a lot of sense.
And what was your initial degree plan when you went to the University of Delaware?
Well, I had already done Outward Bound, and so I always say my experience at University of Delaware was very much like birds and trees, like very classic environment. Like I did biology, chemistry.
Yeah.
And then I went to the University of Colorado and I took a really important class around environmental justice. And we started working on environmental justice organizing campaigns with primarily Mexican immigrants that were facing tremendous environmental inequities, and then juxtaposed against just tremendous wealth that in Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah.
And I realized.
So it was a local issue.
A local issue. Yeah. And I desperately wanted to communicate with the folks I was working with. And I grew up taking French classes. That's what I opted into in elementary, middle, and high school. And because of that real desire to communicate and to try to be a force of change in environmental justice issues, I decided I wanted to learn Spanish. So I went to the University of Colorado and I said, I have to graduate on time. This is a fortune to go to school.
Yeah.
And so the one place that I could go study and still graduate in time happened to be in Alicante, in Spain.
Mm.
So I didn't have tremendous choice.
Yeah.
But by sheer accident and incredible great fortune, I got to study in the south of Spain and have incredible professors.
There are worse places you could have landed.
Great food.
Right.
We took siestas on the Mediterranean.
Like sherry for lunch every day.
It's a pretty.
So did you set out with this intention of like the nonprofit and environmental justice degree program, or was that something that evolved? Did you just start school? You're like, I'm going to go to college and figure it out. Is that kind of how it started? And then you ended up being pulled in a certain direction?
Well, again, so I had this Outward Bound experience, and then it was birds and trees and environmental understanding. Then I had this broader perspective through coursework and experiences at the University of Colorado. But from the get-go, I knew I wanted to do something around environment.
Cool.
The shift really came in Colorado when I realized, wow, it's not only birds and trees.
Yeah.
Like, it's people. And so that, like, how do we as a society manage the needs of like the world writ large, right? All the creatures on the world. So, so that moved me more towards environmental justice, environmental studies experience. And then in Spain, I studied and thought a lot about more of sustainability, especially at a place like Alicante, which had tremendous natural assets, but were overrun at times with endless tourists. And so how could a city sustain itself and continue to grow economically, but in a way that preserves what in fact attracts people to the city in the first place?
And prior to landing in Spain, how much Spanish had you studied?
None. I still,
that's great.
Yeah, very much remember, like, on the bus. So we took a plane to Madrid. We spent a week in there. We had a ton of fun. We also went to the Prado, but mostly had a lot of fun. Then we took a bus from Madrid to Alicante. And I remember going over this hill thinking, like, give me the guidebook. I can't say, like, I don't know how to say anything. Yeah. Like, I need to be able to introduce myself. And so we like crested the hill, and all of these families are waiting for us. And I learned how to say, like, my name is Joanne, and that was it. And then my host family are these remarkable, amazing, generous, loving people. And they taught me everything. I mean, I also took classes, but they were so patient. And I remember, like, they would pick up a fork and say tenedor, and I'd repeat after them. Right. And one time they were like, mosquito. I'm like, oh, that one I get. You know, some of these I can.
You're like, oh, you borrowed that from English.
I understand. But yeah, so I had this, they didn't speak any English. I didn't speak any Spanish. Nice. We did a lot of smiling initially.
Right. At least it was smiles.
Yeah. I learned words like, so the family, they were great cooks, and I learned to say, like, que rico, the food, and they were really happy with that. Yeah, right. So yeah, it was a remarkable and amazing experience. So that was
just complete immersion.
So I really spoke nothing when I arrived. I also had really, really great teachers who, like, would assign us, like, tonight your assignment is to go to the bar and to talk to people and
not get stabbed.
No, and
don't say the wrong thing.
No, and because the best way to learn a language is to talk to people. Yeah. So we had one of our classes called conversation. Yeah. Right. So, and we took an art history class. Anyway, Armando Migueles and his wife Cynthia are the folks that run the program in Alicante. And I learned a lot of Spanish, and I learned a lot of Spanish from them, from my teachers, and from my host family. Tatiana and Miguel Carlos are the mom and dad there. But I also learned a lot about welcoming people to a place, and about sort of the sharing pieces of your culture and making people feel very, very at at home.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
And so I always admired that about Armando and Cynthia, and after that experience wanted to incorporate that into something I did professionally.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of always in the back of my head. I wasn't sure exactly how to do it.
Cool. Well, we're going to take a little break and get comfortable.
Okay, cool.
And we'll be back very soon. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web. We'll check you in a few.